You work incredibly hard, you finally land that promotion or a new job, and a bigger number starts hitting your bank account every single month. And man, for those first few weeks, it genuinely feels like a massive financial breakthrough. But then, fast forward 6 months, and somehow you feel just as broke as you did before. Well, today, we're going to figure out exactly why that happens, and way more importantly, how to stop it cold.
It's a completely valid question. Why on earth does making more money feel like absolutely nothing changed? If you've ever stared at your bank balance after a pay bump and just wondered where all that extra cash went, I really want to validate that lived experience for you right now. You are not imagining things. Think of this explainer as a detective story. We're tracking down an invisible leak in your bank account. And to find that leak, we have to talk about how we track our money. Most people try tracking their expenses to find the leak, but they quit after 2 or 3 weeks because it feels tedious, right? The data just looks obvious. But here's the secret. A single month of tracked spending is a terrible sample size. It lies to you. 1 month might have a birthday, a car repair, or just a busy social calendar. To find the real leak, you have to look at a full 90-day window.
90 days smooths out all those one-off events and reveals the actual, reoccurring, structural spending patterns. And that brings us to the core premise of our investigation today. A raise only changes your financial position if the extra money is deliberately redirected. This is a huge paradigm shift. If you don't have a predetermined structural plan for your money before the raise hits, that extra income is completely invisible. It just gets absorbed into your undefined everyday spending. The stuff that happens month after month without ever being flagged as a big purchase. Left unmanaged, your raise just quietly raises the ceiling of what feels normal to spend on a random Tuesday.
So, what exactly are these silent budget killers? Rent, utility bills, subscriptions, those are the easy categories to track. They're fixed, and you already know what they cost. No, the culprits stealing your raise before you even notice it are much sneakier. Let's identify the specific psychological and mathematical traps that are draining your new salary.
Corporate number one is a term you've likely heard, but it is dangerous precisely because it's so incredibly subtle. Lifestyle inflation, or lifestyle creep. This is the process where your spending quietly expands to match your rising income. Now, sometimes it's a nicer apartment, but the real discovery, the one that only shows up when you track your spending for a full 90 days, is almost never a single large purchase. It's the accumulation of small, frequent, invisible spending. A $4 coffee, a delivery fee, a quick convenience store stop, an app purchase, or taking a taxi just this once. Individually, these are totally below our threshold of concern. A single $4 coffee doesn't threaten anyone's budget. But the problem is frequency, not size. A $4 daily habit is over $1,400 a year. That number would freak you out as a single annual charge, but it's totally invisible when broken into 365 forgettable transactions.
And the deep psychology driving those constant, tiny upgrades is a phenomenon called hedonic adaptation. Basically, it's our psychological tendency to quickly return to a baseline of satisfaction after a positive change. When you get that raise, you get a short, amazing burst of emotional relief, but within a matter of weeks, that new income level just becomes your new normal. The exact same underlying financial anxiety you used to have just returns, recalibrated to a higher number. This is why you can earn way more but feel exactly as financially stressed as you did before. Your brain's sense of enough simply moved the goalposts.
Now, as much as we'd love to blame it all on behavioral psychology, there is a harsh mathematical reality at play here too. This is the math problem literally nobody explains to you when they cheerfully hand you your new offer letter. We really need to look at what actually happens to your gross raise before it even has a chance to hit your checking account.
Think about that gross raise you were promised as a whole beautiful pie. Well, it gets sliced away almost instantly. One massive slice goes immediately to higher taxes and deductions. Another slice is quietly eaten up by inflation and maybe even lost subsidies. What you are actually left with, that final, tiny sliver of actual spendable cash, is much, much smaller than the headline number on your offer letter led you to believe.
Let's break those slices down so you know exactly who is taking a bite out of your paycheck. First, marginal taxes. In most tax systems, your raise is taxed at your highest marginal rate, so you lose a noticeable chunk instantly. Second, benefit phase-outs. Earning more might quietly reduce your access to certain tax credits or subsidies. Third, good old inflation. If you get a 4% raise, but the cost of living went up 5%, well, you actually just lost purchasing power. And finally, scaled payroll deductions. Things calculated as a percentage of your income naturally rise, which pulls down your take-home pay. These 4 structural factors quietly shrink the real purchasing power of your new salary, making that tiny sliver of actual cash incredibly vulnerable to the lifestyle creep we just talked about.
Which naturally leads us to the absolute most common financial lie we tell ourselves. I'll save more once I earn more. We have all said it, and we genuinely believe it in the moment, but it rarely happens. And look, it's not because you lack willpower. It's because small purchases are rarely itemized in our memory. You remember your last big purchase, but you can't remember your last 10 small ones. Without a predetermined structure, your decisions are made reactively. And in the moment, there's always some perfectly justified use for a little extra cash.
Here's the really hard truth. Saving habits absolutely must survive at low incomes if they're ever going to work at high ones. Behavioral patterns do not magically fix themselves just because your paycheck gets larger. If you have a habit of letting extra money disappear into a dozen small, untracked daily purchases at a lower salary, that exact same habit just scales up when you get a raise. The frequency just increases. You won't magically have more savings, you'll just have a slightly more expensive version of your exact same lifestyle.
All right, enough agitation. Let's talk about the solution. How do we actually fix this and stop the invisible leak? First, you have to make the pattern visible. Once you actually group 90 days of small transactions into a single category, a habit that felt totally harmless suddenly reveals itself as a massive line item in your budget. Once you see that true cost, you can finally take control. And the fix is incredibly simple. Assign the raise before it arrives. This is a structural, automated fix. Remember, we are relying on math here, not willpower.
So the crucial point is implementing this clear 4-part framework. Step 1, calculate the actual net increase. Look at the money after taxes and deductions, not the big headline number. Step 2, split it with a fixed rule. For example, 50% straight to investments, 30% to a specific goal like paying off debt, and 20% to genuinely improve your lifestyle today. Step 3, and this is the magic bullet, automate the split immediately. Set it up the very same day the new salary takes effect. This works because it removes the money before your brain can ever categorize it as available for a small, frequent, harmless spend. And finally, step 4, keep visible lifestyle changes deliberately smaller than the raise itself.
Let's put some concrete numbers to that final step to show you just how powerful it really is. Let's say your income goes up by 15%. If you consciously cap your lifestyle and fixed cost growth at just 5 to 7%, you are effectively guaranteeing that the wealth gap compounds in your favor. And honestly, the best part? You still get to enjoy the raise. You still get to upgrade your life. But you are structurally forcing the majority of that new money to build your future security, rather than just disappearing into a daily convenience store habit.
Because ultimately, it all comes down to this climactic paradigm shift. There is a stark difference between money just flowing out of a tap and a fortress being built. Income is just money flowing in. Wealth is what is left over after spending. They are not the same thing at all. A raise increases your income, but it does not, by itself, increase your wealth or your financial peace of mind. Wealth is entirely dictated by the protective gap you build between what you make and what you spend.
This right here is the real formula for wealth. It is the gap between income and spending. Income size alone does not create security. Protecting that gap is what builds real wealth. A person earning a modest salary who protects a wide, automated gap between their income and their spending creates infinitely more security than someone earning a massive, high income that is plagued by out-of-control, invisible lifestyle creep.
Which leaves us with this final thought for today's explainer. If your next raise completely disappeared today, would you actually be wealthier because of the habits you've built? Or would you just find yourself living in a much more expensive trap? Stop relying on financial autopilot. Take structural control of your next paycheck before it even arrives. Track those hidden 90-day leaks and start turning your hard-earned income into actual wealth. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one.